Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, September 28th, and you are at the Transportation Commission meeting. This is a hybrid meeting, and we are joined in person, as you know, and virtually. My name is Bridget Obikoya, and I am the Transportation Commission Staff Liaison, and I am joined here by Transportation Commissioners, and I will turn it over to Chairman Slatt.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Obukoya. I have no specific things to call out other than I just encourage everybody to make sure your microphone is on before you're speaking so that everyone both in the room and virtually can hear. And that also certain cell phones, if you put them near the microphones, have a problem. So please keep your cell phone in your pocket and away from the microphone if you're coming up and speaking. But other than that, I think we are ready to jump into our first agenda item at your leisure, Ms. Obukoya.
Thank you. First, we have the Arlington County Police Department on automated enforcement and other traffic programs, and we have Captain Damon Washington and Lieutenant Aviv Berkowitz. Thank you.
I think you have to turn them on the bottom. It's an on button. Hello? Okay. Good evening. I'm Captain Damon Washington of the Arlington County Police Department. I'm the commander of the Special Operations Section. Today here with me is going to be Lieutenant Aviv Berkowitz, who's sitting to my left. And then also we have Caroline Allen. She is our senior employee for the Automated Enforcement Unit. And then our newly hired employee, which is Sabrina Bonilla, who was recently hired to help manage the photo speed program. So in the special operations section, we have about 51 employees, and the special operations section is made up of motor traffic officers. We also have the parking aides or PSAs that do our parking enforcement. We have a different version of that, which is the traffic management unit, TMUs, which have TSSs, traffic safety specialists, and they assist with large community events, special events like the Marine Corps Marathon or the Army 10 Miler, or any kind of serious traffic management issues, maybe trees down, lights out, or anything of that nature. And then one of our most favorite employees, we have our crossing guards that go out and, of course, have cross the kids at the schools for elementary and middle schools. So to turn it over, we're going to hear from Lieutenant Aviv Berkowitz first, and he's going to brief you on some of our traffic management and safety issues campaigns that we're going on. Now you turned it off, Aviv.
Yeah, good to go. All right. Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Can you move it just a little closer to your mouth?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Better?
Thank you. Perfect. Thanks so
All
much.
right, excellent. So I'm going to talk about a few things here. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have that I don't address. I will talk briefly about our progress on photo speed and getting that up and running, if that's okay. And then I'll talk about some of our off-duty traffic enforcement programs that we administer in our section. And then last, I'll just talk about some of the smaller campaigns that we do and participate in as part of the unit or within our unit, the motor unit. And to be clear, my specific role in the section is I'm the lieutenant of the motor unit. So that's the guys and girls who ride motorcycles. I'm the lieutenant that oversees that. And I also have the good fortune of being assigned to the photo enforcement unit as well. So I get to work with these with Caroline and Sabrina on that project as well. So in terms of photo speed, one thing I do have to lead with is that myself, Caroline, Captain Washington are under an NDA, non-disclosure, so we can't get too much into it at this point in time. But I'll give you an overview of sort of the timeline, the progress that we've made thus far. So as I'm assuming this commission understands, is that the Arlington County Police Department has been administering a photo red light program for about 12 years, just over 12 years. Caroline can speak a little bit more to that in a moment. She's got a lot of depth and breadth in that program. We ride a Falls Church City contract. And then what we decided in the spring of 2022 was it'd be best for the county that we establish our own contract for our photo ride, photo speed. So we began that process and went and developed our request for proposal, put that out in cyberspace. And that was in March of 23, so March of this year. As a result, 5 vendors submitted proposals to or bids on that RFP. So in April of this year, we developed our multi-department selection advisory committee and technical advisory committees. And since that time, we've been in the process of going through these, reviewing them, and hopefully in the future, and again, I apologize for being terse, but we are an NDA, we hope to award a contract to one of these vendors and get the program off the ground. So some of the things, some additional things I'd like to speak to regarding the photo speed program is sort of how the methodologies we're using to determine where these things are going to go. And again, I can't get too far into it. Additionally, DES, our partners at DES, are the ones that we're working with and collaborating on to determine the best place to put these things, these cameras, as we move forward. Some of the items that we're looking at are crash history, speed differentials, school walk zones, equity areas, traffic volumes. So there's a lot that goes into it. In fact, frankly, as a layperson with data and analysis, it's quite amazing the work that this group is doing, and the effort being put in is amazing and really inspiring actually to see the work and energy being put in to the program that we're trying to develop, a world-class program we're trying to develop in Arlington County to increase transportation safety. So I think some other things to note is that Ms. Bonilla was hired as our photo speed administrator, and once the program's off the ground, she will, in conjunction with Ms. Allen, will be running the program. And then over the next few months, as this thing is new and fresh, we hope to rebrand our program, and as opposed to just kind of being our automated enforcement photo speed, we want to come up with a really solid program and rebrand this and make this part of our culture here in Arlington and the transportation safety culture here in Arlington, which is pretty impressive. So some other things I'm going to talk to specifically that I oversee is an off-duty traffic enforcement program. So within the special operations section, we manage this program wherein officers can work off duty to contribute to the transportation safety mission in the county. There's 5 programs we offer. One is the department speed program that focuses on speeding. One is we call it red light TARP. So they focus on red light violations. Really, all other violations is kind of open-ended, if you will. It gives the officer an opportunity to go out and enforce transportation safety, either complaints or issues that come up in the community. Additionally, we focus on TARP areas, so areas where there's a lot of accidents historically. And then we have a department hands-free program where we can focus on distracted driving and hands-free type violations. And then we have 2 DMV programs that we administer. One is called Police Traffic Services, and the focus of that is speeding and seatbelt violations. And then the last program is DMV Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Program, which focuses on just that, pedestrian and bicycle safety. And we do that through education, all these programs through education and enforcement. It's not strictly an enforcement opportunity. This is an education opportunity. And what else we have here? I have some data associated with that I can provide you if you bear with me for a second, just to give you an idea of the success of the program. So specifically related to the off-duty traffic enforcement programs, I just went back to 2022 and 2023. Our officers have worked a total of 8,600 hours of these programs combined, and total citations issued for this period. So all of 2022 and 2023 to date is 16,232. So a lot of interaction, a lot of engagement with that specific program. So very successful A lot of effort put in with those programs. And then finally, the last piece I want to speak to is, if you bear with me, sorry, is just the internal campaigns we run within the what I call the motor unit, but we're truly known as the transportation safety unit within the department. The unit has 7 motor officers and then 2 sergeants who supervise them, and then myself at the top. We handle all things related to transportation safety. So we do the, your general enforcement education, traffic stops, but focus on complaints that come into the section. So all traffic complaints come into our section and those get doled out, and our guys handle the bulk of those. Sometimes we collaborate with other units in the department, like our community engagement division or patrol, but by and large, this section handles all these traffic complaints. They do a phenomenal job considering, over the last couple of years, the unit's been constricted a little bit. We're working on expanding, but time will tell on that, and staffing and such. But the unit does a tremendous job. But one of the things I want to highlight before I wrap up is that every month these officers put together a internal campaign where they identify some specific issues in the community related to transportation safety, and they spend the day addressing it. They create an operational plan. They really go about it in a professional manner, and the results are staggering, both from the statistics are fine, but the engagement opportunities we've had, and just one example was this year, I believe it was Univision came out and did an interview while we were doing these campaigns. It was just a great opportunity to outreach and work with the community. And, and then one that we are going to implement, another internal campaign that we're going to implement this year for the remainder of the school year, school safety initiative. So every month we're going to spend a day focusing specifically on school safety. So that could be all issues related to school buses, crosswalks, speeding, the reduced speed zones. So these guys put in a tremendous amount of effort, and it's just an impressive effort on a group that's been constricted over the last couple of years. So I think that's all I have. Captain, is there anything I'm missing there?
Let me just add one other thing. I know oftentimes when people think about transportation safety and police, we generally focus on enforcement, but really under the leadership of Chief Penn, we also like to focus on engagement and education. And our motor officers do a lot of that also. Even though he said that we wrote about 16,000 tickets, those are the citations that were actually issued. But if we give warning or we give a verbal warning, there's still some education and engagement there happening with the motorists. But beyond that, we also go and we speak to the younger folks of our community. Oftentimes we've had programs called Pops with Cops, where we go out to some of the after school programs. We have ice creams and popsicles with the younger kids. We read books, we show them the motorcycles, and we talk about being safe, crossing the road, and give them some positive engagement with police officers with the uniform and things of that nature. We've done a lot of those kind of events throughout the year and also through the summer. And one of the other things, just to highlight, every year we always do a back to school initiative right at the first week of school, where we go out and we do some really enforcement and engagement with motorists coming back. We deploy speed monitoring devices and signs to warn motorists how fast they're going, to slow down in these specific areas. And we also deploy the verbal message boards, the VMS boards, to also remind motorists that, hey, school's back in session and that you need to slow down and be aware of the pedestrians and your surroundings while moving throughout the roads of Arlington. If we don't have any immediate questions with that, I'd like to turn it over to Caroline so she can just give you an overview of what we're doing with the photo red light program.
Great. Yeah, we'd love to get full breadth presentation and then we'll do questions.
Good evening. The photo red light program was established to, the photo red light program was established to improve intersection safety where red light issues have been identified. The program started in 2010 with 4 cameras at 4 intersections, and we currently have cameras in 9 intersections. We're in the process of adding 6 additional intersections. We have seen a noticeable decrease in violations after the first year, and within 4 to 5 years of installation, we see violations drop by almost half. Currently, 92% of violators don't get a second violation. That's about all I have, Captain.
Okay, that's the meat of our presentation. We'd like to open it up to you guys for any kind of questions or comments that you may have.
Awesome, thanks. I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for coming out. We so often have DES staff out to talk about what they do, and we've just not had an opportunity in the past to have folks from the police department out. And so it is just absolutely fantastic to hear from you and what you're doing. So thank you for making time. I know you all have way too much to do. And giving time on an evening is not the easiest thing in the world. So thank you for that. I see Commissioner Lantelmi has a hand up, so I will toss it over to
I
him.
love the automated program. I'm glad that you're extending it. Having driven through the district, which has a real robust program for both speed cameras and red light cameras, I have noticed a total change in behavior driving, because I go through there regularly. The K Street Tunnel, almost every car going through there is at 25 miles an hour. Kenilworth Avenue, which used to be a speedway, almost everybody sticks to around 50 miles an hour, assuming the traffic lets you go that fast. But it really works. It's been amazing to see the change in the district, where cars had been going fast. They don't. They simply don't. And I'd like to see that here. I can hardly wait to get the speed cameras here in Arlington, because there are many places where we all know everybody just goes fast because the roads are designed the wrong way. They're designed to go fast. The speed cameras really do work, even in places where the configuration of the road says go fast. You see that sign for speed cameras, one ticket, people, you're right, people don't do it again because they get gotcha. So anyway, thank you. This is great. The more you can do, the better. I'm totally on board and totally support it. So thank you.
We definitely appreciate that. I think people really like the cameras until they get a ticket and they don't like it.
Commissioner Thea, I see your mic on. Does that mean you have a question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Have a couple of questions, but first, I guess, so one of the big problems I see when other jurisdictions are implementing red light speed cameras in their streets is concerns over cybersecurity and data protection. What kind of protections are being built into the contract that the eventual vendor, when they're chosen, will have to take care of? Will the data protection be handled in-house, or is that going to be handled by the vendor? If there's anybody that can talk on that.
Sure. That will be handled by the vendor. The code does dictate that it needs to be a system that is similar to DMV's security.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Furman.
This question is in relation to what I've seen in Alexandria City recently, was they've deployed some speed cameras in some of the school zones. I've noticed there's a good bit of signage that's been put up that's warning drivers beforehand, to my mind, somewhat defeating the purpose ultimately of getting the enforcement through the camera. Instead, it's almost the threat of the signage. Do you all have an opinion on which way you're leaning in terms of warning signage or having the cameras basically do the job?
I'll take that. As we said before, we want to educate drivers over penalizing drivers for any kind of fines or that kind of thing. We're always also looking out for compliance, more or less, than doing a revenue or generating money from any kind of fines that we might get from tickets. So in Arlington County, all roads are 25 miles per hour unless posted or stated. Also through Vision Zero, which is the program that's head up by DES to try to get all accidents down in the county and in the region down to 0 accidents. They feel that more signage and warning drivers what the actual rules and regulations are for that stretch of the road is going to be beneficial for them, because it's not just about trying to catch somebody to get a ticket, but also just warning them and getting them to slow down by their own compliance. So yes, in most of the school zones where these cameras will be deployed, there will be additional signage indicating that there's a camera ahead, or that this through Vision Zero, a lot of school zones have been designated to be a lower speed from 25 to 20 miles per hour. DES is also starting to utilize some things that they're calling tactical speed bumps, which is a new thing that they're doing. Instead of having the permanent speed bumps down in the ground, these kind of newer speed bumps, they can deploy, they can keep them down for maybe a month or 2 months, whatever time frame that they deem necessary, and then they can take them up and then redeploy them somewhere else. We're going to also utilize that same kind of methodology with the red light cameras. Through the process, we're determining, again, which locations should receive the cameras first. But just because one location may be having or showing a higher volume of crashes or violations for speed, that doesn't necessarily mean that another location doesn't deserve to have the opportunity to have the cameras there also. So these cameras will be put in places for the desired amount of time and then rotated to different locations.
Thank you.
Great. That answered another one of my questions, which was if we were doing permanent cameras or movable cameras. So thank you so much for that.
No, one other thing too, if we wanted to talk about necessarily how many cameras in this, we would have to really consider that at any location, we would probably have to have 2 cameras, right? Either on that roadway, north and south, or east and west of the roadway. So which would, if they said we were going to get 20 cameras, that's really only 10 cameras that can be deployed because it's 2 cameras at each location.
Right, 10 locations, 20
Right,
cameras.
right.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you talk a bit more about staffing levels? I heard 51 employees are in special operations and that things are a bit constricted from the past. Can you talk a bit more about how big the department has been in the past and where those losses have been, if it's parking safety aides, crossing guards, sworn officers, that kind of makeup?
Yeah, well, staffing, I think I've been here the longest. I've been with the police department. It'll be 27 years in November, on November 24th. So I was a motor officer before, back in 1999. So at that time frame, when I was up there as a motor officer in a traffic car, there were, I think, 18 or 19 motor officers. Now we have 8, 7 or 8, right? And but over that time frame, just through some of the developments throughout the community, through the atrocities of George Floyd, through COVID, through just the change in climate around policing. A lot of policing agents are experiencing some staffing challenges. And Arlington is no different than that. And a lot of the challenges are within the policing agency, but not necessarily within the other disciplines housed in special operations. Yes, there is always been a challenge of getting a lot of crossing guards, but we have 19 crossing guards with 3 supervisors, and one of our longest serving crossing guards have been here for 44 years. But the biggest thing about the crossing guards is that they make the least amount of money of anybody else in the police department. So it's about their dedication to the service and their craft. Same things with PSAs, and then TMUs are a brand new discipline. All of the TMUs, I think there's 8 TMUs with 1 supervisor, and there are probably around like 10 PSAs, but they then section that off to make the TMU, the traffic management unit, different from PSAs. So they took some viable PSAs who could handle more responsibility in a different discipline and made the new unit. So we're constantly building those back up.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm sorry, like everything goes by very fast and there are a lot of acronyms. One more time, PSAs versus TMUs.
Okay, so
what's different?
TMU is
Thank
the
you so
traffic
much.
management unit, and they are consisted of TSSs, traffic safety specialists. So they drive pickup trucks, they deploy cones, they deploy signboards, they have large arrow boards on the back of their trucks. And if, like the weekend, just the past weekend, we thought we were going to have a big storm. It rained all weekend, so we stood up a lot of personnel. So we would have our TMU out there just in case if trees came down, if there were lights out, power lines, things of those natures. They would address that. That's a little bit more of a demanding job versus a PSA, which is a public service aid, which are our employees to go out and enforce parking, who go out and write parking tickets, who put boots on your vehicle when you haven't paid your fines, who does those kind of disciplines, those kind of things.
Great, thank you so much. And PSAs, do they do anything with a car that is not parked, or is it exclusively parking?
Well, if your car is
Tickets.
idling, in a bike lane or something of that nature, it's not necessarily appropriately parked. Yeah, they can cite and ticket and tow those vehicles. Also, they also assist with special events. Arlington County is really large, especially before COVID. We would have, events every weekend, Beer Fest here, Jazz Fest there, all other kind of things. You know, a lot of people love to come to Arlington to do those things. One of our largest events are 4th of July, the Armed Forces Race, which is mostly here in Clarendon, Army 10 Mile, and the Marine Corps Marathon. So that really depletes all of our resources at the police department to handle the majority of those events. And we get a lot of mutual aid from other departments, and our PSAs and TMU help out at all those events.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Do other commissioners? Commissioner Terry, go ahead.
Hey, good evening. I apologize for being a little late here, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for all you and your colleagues do at the Arlington County Police Department. I'm very excited to hear about automated enforcement and that actually growing. There's so much data out there showing it is effective at reducing speeding and improving the safety of the roadways. And I'm very happy to see that. I love that you're talking about putting it in school zones. Also, work zones are places where that happens in Maryland when I'm on I-70 and 270. You hit those work zones with the cameras are, and people slow down. You know, people are out there just trying to make a living, doing the work on the roadways, and the price for that should not be that they're seriously injured or killed. And that automated enforcement can really change behavior there. So we'd just encourage making sure we're looking at that as another area as well. And just appreciate the presence of Arlington County Police to help improve road safety. There's also tons of data out there showing high visibility enforcement campaigns, things like that. It's important work that you're doing that actually saves lives of people on the roadway. So thank you so much for what you do, and definitely a big supporter of automated enforcement and so much of what y'all do to really bring down speeding, impaired driving, distracted driving, those really dangerous driving behaviors. Thank you.
I just want to build on Commissioner Terry's comments real quick, because I know there are only two places that we're allowed to do speed enforcement statutorily at this point, which is school zones, which we hear about all the time from staff, and work zones. Are work zones included in the RFP? Are we looking at doing automated speed enforcement in construction areas?
Goodness, I'll figure this out by the end. No, we're focused on school zones right now. To my knowledge, we're focused on school zones. Of course, it's not excluded in the future as the program potentially grows. I think they would look at it, but right now the focus is school zones.
All right, thank you.
And then also, if I might just build on something that's struck me in preparations, looking at the county code or the state code, and just reference signage. In the code, just the language is a conspicuous sign shall be placed within 1,000 feet of any school, crossing zone, or highway work zone at which a photo speed monitoring device is used. So essentially, it's part of the code that we utilize that signage. And then the other thing I wanted to build on, just to be clear, because a lot of acronyms, I agree with you. I was thinking that is that to be clear, the PSAs and TMU are not sworn personnel; they are civilian personnel. Just want to make sure that was clear.
All right, Commissioner Furman, I think your hand was up.
Yeah, one last question. The number of folks that you currently have within the division is 7. What would be considered fully staffed, or what do you hope that number will be in the future?
Right. How many can I have? I mean, you know, I'd like to go back up to the 19 or 20 where we are, but we are a specialized unit. Right now, I think the main focus is to have more individuals in patrol. And in patrol is where they respond to the majority of the calls for service. When you call 911, that's who gets dispatched to those calls. So that's really going to be the police department's primary function is patrol. So, but we have not cut off any kind of opportunities for an officers to go to other specialized units as far as criminal investigation section, or maybe our special operations, or Homeland Security, or some of the other disciplines, community engagement division, you know, so there's a lot of other divisions that also need personnel. So right now, and I'm not necessarily requesting any more personnel within my discipline, because I understand that the entire department is short of personnel, and our primary focus has to always be patrol and being able to respond to those calls for service through the 911 center.
Commissioner Moradovic.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you all for coming here. I want to reiterate what a lot of the other commissioners have said about the support for the automatic enforcement. I think I've never heard of a police department say that we have enough people. There's always a lack of people, but this is a way to, I think, really address this stuff to free up police officers to do some of the work that requires a physical person being there, some of the work that only they can do. And so I really hope the program will be expanded and that there'll be more red light cameras and in more school zones. And I know a lot of it depends on what happens in Richmond, where you're able to place them. But I think it also, I mean, you mentioned a lot of the changing climate after George Floyd, and traffic stops are dangerous for cops as well. So if we can have traffic enforcement with in an effective manner, that would be with these cameras, that would be great. My question would be, how do you get around some of the problems that DC has had, where you have like people just racking up $12,000 in various fines? I mean, some of those are parking, not red lights or whatever. Like, how do we prevent that? Because the data shows that people that rack up that many fines are like a true menace to society. They're the ones that are going to commit these accidents that lead to deaths and whatnot.
Caroline, do you know if there's anything for that?
I don't, but our fines are collected. The collections are done by the treasurer's office, and you know how effective they are at making sure people are paying.
Okay.
I do believe on red light, the most tickets someone has gotten, I think, is 16. But that's only, I think it's 2% of the total violations, and we've had around 164,000 violations, and only 2% of those get more than like 3 or more violations. So that's a very small percentage.
I mean, how do you deal with people like that these habitual offenders?
Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do other than, from the enforcement standpoint, is issue more tickets.
Okay. And while y'all are here, I just had a question, what the departmental policy is. I know that when you're out on call a lot, you're not able to get a parking spot every time conveniently. You need to leave the car somewhere in the road. What's the departmental policy for parking in a bike lane? Because I kind of see that a lot.
Well, if an officer is responding for a call, we always have to just take due regard for safety in any of our actions that we do.
All right.
So if we have to respond for a call for service for someone, a suspicious circumstance or something that's occurring at a store or business or a home, and the most immediate place for us to park is a bike lane or on the curb or next to a fire hydrant, the officer is going to do that, because the priority is to go in and handle the call and make sure that life safety is always our most primary thing. If an officer is just parking in a bike lane to run into the store to buy a hot dog or get a gift for their partner or something like that, then of course that's inappropriate action, and we will definitely look into that. And if you see that, then we encourage you to call us and inform us of that action, take down the officer's vehicle number and maybe a description of the officer, and bring it to our attention so that we can address it appropriately.
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about automatic enforcement and how that can contribute to greater safety, but a lot of it is up to DES as well, and making these roads that don't require as much as enforcement, because it forces drivers to behave in a safe manner. Like we talked about crossing guards, there are some countries that crossing guards don't exist because it's safe to walk around. So I thank y'all for the work y'all do and making biking, driving, walking, riding, even motorcycle around this county safer. Thank you.
And just let me clarify one thing. We do not have enough people. So if you have some more people to give us, we'll definitely take that. I just wanted to say that I understand and we understand what the core mission for our department is, which is patrol and safety of the citizens in that regard. And I'm willing to utilize the personnel that I have effectively so that way we can get our job done and that patrol can get their job done.
Commissioner Theo, you had another question, I think?
Yep. So regarding enforcement, what is the current status of mutual enforcement with the District of Columbia regarding traffic tickets and fines? I know that is a rocky situation, isn't it?
So I'm assuming you're talking about maybe reciprocity when someone
Correct.
doesn't pay their ticket, but they were somewhere else, then they
Correct.
can't get their license back. I'm not necessarily up to speed in that. Are any of you guys at all? No. I'm sorry, I can't answer that for you right now, but if I
Yeah.
can find that question and bring it back to you, I will.
We
Okay.
we do not have reciprocity, and it is a Commonwealth-wide problem, not a local problem. Is all that I know.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate you helping me out.
Always trying to help. Awesome. So I just want to reiterate also, huge supporter of the automated enforcement program. Really happy that we're moving forward on speed. Really happy that we're moving forward on getting more locations. A little sad that we are not there yet. We all had kind of a common starting point, and Alexandria City has managed to get their photo enforcement program in place before the start of school, and we haven't. It sounds like a contract hasn't been awarded yet. Is that my proper understanding? So is it safe to say we're at least 6 months from seeing implementation at this point, considering a contract is still not awarded?
I would like to say that, I mean, I understand your sentiments of us taking a long time, but oftentimes it's not important to be first. It's important to be correct and right. So when our program comes online, that's what it will be. Yes, I know that Alexandria came out and Fairfax came out and maybe even Fall Church, but once Arlington comes online, it's going to be right and it'll be for us. I don't know what kind of challenges they're having. I don't know what companies they're going with, but I know we're taking the right steps to make sure that our program is going to be the best that it can be. And unfortunately, it's taking a little longer than some people wanted to, but it'll be good.
Great. I see. You're not going to give me a time frame, are you?
Well, I mean, I don't want to put myself in a box or give you false information. I mean, it could be January. Yeah, it could be, or it could be July. Right now, and I'm just not at the liberty to give you a time of when the program is going to roll out. And but I do know that once it comes out, we have the right people in place to ensure that it's going to be successful and effective.
Great.
And I think that's really more important than being first.
Appreciate it. Any final questions from folks? Awesome. Then we will stop taking up more of your time. Captain Washington, thank you so much. Thank you to your team. Again, it's been absolutely fantastic having you out. We'll have to do it again, but not too frequently, so we're not using up your valuable time, but we appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate the invitation, and you guys have a good night.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is Sunrise Senior Living Site Plan with staff member Rob Gibson and the applicant.
Don't all fight over who gets to go first.
That was on.
Someone's run off with the mic. There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Everyone can hear me okay, I hope? Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Clyde McGraw. I'm Vice President of Real Estate for Sunrise Senior Living. I am here to present our proposal to redevelop 716 South Glebe Road, which is the former Arlington United Methodist Church. Before I get into the details of the project, though, I would like to tell you a little bit about Sunrise Senior Living. At Sunrise, we are a mission-based organization, and our mission is to champion quality of life for all seniors. In addition, we do have a forward-looking vision, which is to create the preferred lifestyle for enjoying longer, healthier, happier lives. Sunrise is one of the largest providers of senior living in North America. We have nearly 275 communities. We were founded 40 years ago in Northern Virginia, and in fact, our first purpose-built Sunrise was actually built in Arlington at 2000 North Glebe Road, which is a community that we still operate today. We provide a full range of services from independent living to skilled nursing, but our specialty is really in assisted living and memory care, which is what we are proposing for the site here. Assisted living is for seniors who need assistance with activities of daily living, including bathing, dressing, using the bathroom, mobility, and meals. And our memory care is for those seniors with Alzheimer's disease and other memory impairments. While traditionally Sunrise has built only Victorian-style buildings, which I'm sure many of you have seen across the DMV, over the last 10 years, we've become much more forward-looking with our architecture. Now each new Sunrise is designed to fit in aesthetically with each neighborhood they're built and be much more reflective of the local design vernacular. For example, these are 4 recent Sunrise buildings that are built in different markets across the country, including Newton, Massachusetts, Burlingame, California, Issaquah, Washington, and Summit, New Jersey. And you can see each building is designed differently to fit into each local neighborhood. When we look at the Arlington market specifically, we find that there is a significant imbalance between the available supply and needed demand for our type of housing. In fact, there's not been a new senior housing building built in Arlington County in over 20 years. When we estimate the needed supply within just 3 miles of the site for assisted living, we estimate the need of about 1,100 units, while only about 482 exist today. It's similar when we look at the need for memory care, which we estimated about 600 units needed, while only about 100 units exist in the market today. There's clearly a great need for new senior housing in Arlington County.
Would be disqualified because of using this athlete who would then deemed to be using a performance-enhancing drug and doping. U.S. would move up to the.
Thank you. When we look at the area around the site, we can see it's located on South Glebe Road between Arlington Boulevard and Columbia Pike. The area is mixed use with a variety of both single-family homes, tall apartment buildings up to 6 or 7 stories, churches, schools, a fire station, and other commercial uses. The physical site, as I mentioned, 716 South Glebe Road. We are located on the west side of Glebe between 7th and 8th Streets. And here we have some of the views of the existing conditions. So the first view here, this is looking south on Glebe Road from 7th Street. You can see the former pastor's house in white at the corner. That will be part of the larger development, and the church building in the background. The second view is from 8th Street and Glebe looking north. You can see the church in the background and the bus station, the bus stop that will be retained in the foreground. Next here, the third view is from 8th Street looking east. You can see one of the existing curb cuts here with the open air existing dumpsters that exist today. The fourth view is from the rear surface parking lot. You can see here a portion of the church roof that was previously demolished due to structural issues. And the fifth view is looking east from 7th Street. Again, you see the former pastor's house in white in the corner there. That'll be part of the larger development. Here we have an aerial view of the existing conditions today. You can see the existing church building with partially demolished roof at the bottom of the image, the large surface parking lot, the former pastor's house at the top right. There's currently 4 existing curb cuts on the site, with one off of 7th, a double curb cut off of Glebe, and one off of 8th Street at the bottom. You can also see our location in proximity to our neighbors. On the north side, the existing buildings are about 97 feet from our neighbors. At the northwest, we're about 36 feet from our neighbors. And at the south, we're approximately 150 feet from the Alcova house and about 109 feet across from our neighbors there on 8th. Great. So this is our proposed site plan for the development. The first thing I want to point out is we've strived to push the building as close to Glebe Road as possible and as far away from our neighbors as we can. In fact, we are now approximately 17 feet and 8 feet further from our neighbors to the north and south. In addition, we are 18 feet further from our neighbors to the northwest and a full 86 feet further from the historic Alcoa house at the bottom. We are proposing 4 curb cuts, which is the same number as there is today, with one on 8th Street with access to a small rear service parking lot, a double curb cut on Glebe to allow for resident drop-off, and a single curb cut on 7th Street to allow for a loading zone. I also just wanted to point out the significant increase in street trees, new sidewalks, vast planted gardens and walking paths around the building, as well as new fencing and landscaping on the western boundary of the property. And so here we have some renderings of the project. So this is if you're standing on Glebe looking west at the front of the building. We strive to introduce an arts and crafts style architecture similar to what we find in the neighborhood here. The proposed building is 4 stories, and off of Glebe you'll see the main entrance with the drop-off porte-cochere. Next, this is the building with a view from 7th and Glebe south. Next is the corner of 8th and Glebe. Again, you can see here just the abundance of street trees, landscaping, and also the bus stop that exists today that will be retained in the future. And finally, this is a view of the rear of the building from 8th Street with a small surface parking lot in the foreground with the building in the background. Our proposed program for the development is an assisted living and memory care building of approximately 93,000 square feet and 99 units. The building will be approximately 49 feet tall, and there will be 53 parking spaces on site. We are a very low traffic generating use, and at full occupancy, we anticipate our largest employee shift of about 33 team members arriving on site by 7 a.m. through a combination of driving, public transportation, including the bus stop adjacent to the site, car sharing, biking, and walking. Our team members will decline throughout the day with about 17 in the afternoon and about 6 overnight. Finally, we are requesting a modification of the Arlington County zoning ordinance of a reduction of 7 parking spaces. In regards to building access, as I mentioned, the loading zone will be fully enclosed. You can see the blue access point there on the top of the page. There will be a drop-off package delivery and short-term parking off of Glebe Road as shown in orange. And finally, there will be visitor and employee parking and a rear entry access on the west side of the site as shown in yellow. In addition, there's an existing bus stop in front of the site that will be maintained. We'll also be providing 6 Class 3 bike parking spaces adjacent to the front entry, as well as 4 Class 2 bike parking spaces adjacent to the rear entry, as well as locker and shower facilities for our employees. Finally, there's, of course, an extensive network of pedestrian sidewalks all around the site. Here's just a diagram showing our truck movements. Trucks will come either north or south on Glebe Road, turn down 7th Street into the loading area, and then reverse into the loading zone. All of the truck movements will occur on site. Here's a diagram showing fire truck access, both off of Glebe, adjacent to the porte-cochere, and off of 8th Street via the small surface parking lot in the rear. Regarding transportation improvements, we will be installing new curb ramps and restriping the crosswalk at 8th and Glebe. We'll also be installing new curb ramps as well as allowing for future pedestrian push buttons and an easement for future traffic control equipment by the county at 7th and Glebe. Here we wanted to point out the significant improvements we'll be making to the sidewalk fronting Glebe Road. On the left here, you can see some of the existing sidewalk condition. There's currently a retaining wall, which really limits the amount of maneuverable space. There's no street trees. The sidewalk is only 5 feet wide, and the sidewalk is only 1.5 feet setback from the curb. It's not a very welcoming experience today. For our proposed sidewalk condition, we'll be removing the retaining wall. We'll be planting a landscape buffer with biodiverse street trees. We'll be installing a new 6-foot sidewalk, and the sidewalk will be a full 5.5 feet back from curb, which will be a 4-foot increase from what's there today. Here's that section of Glebe Road looking south. So you can see the building on the right side, landscaped area, including street trees. The street trees are inbound here. There's an existing sewer along Glebe, which doesn't allow street trees to be outbound, a 6-foot sidewalk and a 5.5 foot buffer. This is the section looking down East Street. You've got the building on the right side, landscaped area, 6-foot sidewalk, and then the 5.5-foot buffer with street trees outbound. And finally, same on 7th Street, building on the left side, landscaped area, 6-foot sidewalk, 5.5-foot buffer with outbound street trees. Here we have an area map showing the extensive amount of nearby transportation options, including bus stops both directly in front of the building and across the street. There's multiple bike share options nearby. The Boston Metro is about a mile and a half north of the site. And finally, we do have the Columbia Pike Transit Corridor just to the south of the site. As I mentioned, the site is very well connected today with both roadway and sidewalk connections, bus lines, access to the Boston Metro, and bicycle facilities. Regarding vehicular traffic, the project would actually generate fewer peak trips than what's there today, which were daycares, religious organizations, and a clothing bank. And in addition, the TMP will encourage non-auto modes of transportation. Finally, it's a little bit hard to read, but we'll of course be fully complying with all the standard suite of TDM measures. And thank you very much. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gibson, do you have a presentation for us as well?
Yeah, I do, and it will hopefully be brief. Let me make sure I can share this correctly. Good evening. So there are two elements associated with this plan, a rezoning and the overall site plan. The rezoning is a rezoning of R6 and R5 parcels to the SD Special Development District. That's a requirement for this particular type of use. There are limited zoning districts that support that. So there's an associated rezoning, and then there's the site plan for a development with approximately 1.06 total FAR of density for the assisted living facility, including just over 96,000 square feet of development, which will support 99 units or 120 rooms within the facility. As the applicant has discussed, the site is on the west side of Glebe Road, between 7th and 8th Street South. It's an existing church site today. The existing GLUP for the site is semi-public, low residential. No changes are proposed. And the existing zoning, once again, is R6 and R5 with a proposed SD rezoning. Overall, the project's the 4-story assisted living building, 99 assisted living memory care units with 120 rooms. There are a total of 53 parking spaces associated with the project, 4 in the front, adjacent to the portico share, and 49 in the rear. The project is proposed at LEED Silver, and there are 2 modifications associated with the project for a parking reduction and a front setback to bring that building closer to the street. From a transportation perspective, the project has reduced the overall access to parking from Glebe Road. The parking access has been moved to 8th Street South, and the only access off of Glebe Road is associated with the portico share. The portico share functions primarily, in our perspective, to support emergency vehicle access and emergency response. So this is the place that we anticipate ambulances will support the facility, and also where the fire access is proposed for the facility off of Glebe Road. These were important considerations when looking at the portico share. And with that in mind, we do support the proposed portico share and subsequently the 4 associated parking spaces. That's a reduction from 5, which was proposed at the last SPRC meeting. So there's a little bit more green space buffering that, and overall, as we'll discuss with the streetscape, a far better presentation for pedestrians along South Glebe Road. And so if you haven't been out there lately, this is what you'll see. It's not our most inviting streetscapes. Roughly 2 to 3 foot buffer and 4 and 5 foot wide sidewalks along Glebe Road that without a parking lane can be a very coarse walk with the adjacent traffic. The project will increase the streetscape along South Glebe Road to a 5 foot buffer space and a 6 foot wide sidewalk. The street, Glebe Road, is proposed to be maintained in its existing configuration with 2 southbound and 2 northbound lanes separated by a small median. The side streets will also see significantly improved streetscapes. They will have 6 foot wide sidewalks and a 5 foot wide buffer with street trees planted between the street and the sidewalk. The applicant also is including undergrounding of area utilities on 7th and 8th along the frontage. However, if there are issues with adjacent neighbors getting undergrounded service, there may be a connection line or two remaining at the end of the project. We've gone over the significant improvements in the streetscape. The project has gone through our standard SPRC process with an online engagement in late March of 23, followed by an SPRC, 2 SPRC meetings in April and June. The Transportation Commission is tonight, September 28th, and the Planning Commission is scheduled for October 4th and subsequent County Board at October 14th. Staff's analysis indicates that it's consistent with county policies to support an age-friendly community with its 99 assisted living and memory care units. It is consistent with our affordable housing ordinance and policy, contributing just over $225,000 towards the affordable housing contribution. We've discussed the streetscape improvements, which are consistent with the MTP recommendations for the site. And the project from a sustainability perspective is including a LEED Silver certification, EV parking, and throughout the review process, they have added about, I think it's almost 25% of the parking spaces are permeable spaces to reduce all runoff of the surface lot to the rear. And staff recommends adoption of the zoning ordinance amendment from R6 and R5 to SD, and adoption of the ordinance for the site plan 473 to permit the use. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibson. All right, this is now with the commission for questions or comments. Commissioner Lantelmi, why don't you kick things off?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for the presentations. I have a couple questions for whoever is able to answer it. First is there is a current bus shelter that's adjacent to the property. With the sidewalk widening, will that bus shelter remain or be moved a little bit? And is there an easement if it's in moving to the property? So how does that work?
So the shelter is moving slightly, I think, to the south. It's getting a wider expanded pad. There will be a either replacement of the shelter or moving of the shelter, and there is an associated transit easement for the facility at the back of sidewalk.
Great, so that we can both widen the sidewalk and keep the bus shelter without it impinging on the widened sidewalk?
That is correct.
Great, I'm happy with that. For the 2 side streets, I noticed they're 36 feet wide. Does that mean that there will be parking allowed on both sides of those side streets?
I'm going to say that I don't recall whether or not we resolved it on 8th Street where the fire department discussed having some aerial access. And so that I don't want to speak for the fire department, and they will have the last word.
Okay,
But-
so the fire department may require it to be a no parking zone
That's correct.
on one side, but on the other side of the street?
It should be
Will be
on-street
parking
parking
allowed.
permitted, yes.
Okay. And currently is parking allowed on those two spots?
I believe so. There is on-street parking on both of those streets. The rhythm of the private driveways may, I don't want to overspeak. Yes.
Where there aren't driveways?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Those are my only questions.
I saw movement. Did Wells and Associates want to jump in on any of that? Okay, cool. Other commissioner questions? Commissioner Ludlow.
Yeah, just wanted, just out of curiosity, how many and what type of trucks make the deliveries each day or weekly, whatever your benchmark is? Thank you.
Yes, we typically have 4 deliveries a week. Usually it's 2 food deliveries and 2 supply deliveries, and we typically see about 2 to 3 trash pickups a week. So about 7 large trucks per week coming to the site.
Thank you.
The traffic signal at Glebe and 7th is an antique. I'm afraid it's going to qualify for historic preservation shortly. It appears that it will not be replaced as part of this project, but that an easement is being reserved for future replacement. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. We anticipate it being replaced by the county in the near future. Part of the challenges with, this is a relatively small project, so the improvements are commensurate with the use, and there are going to be, I fear, some challenges with right-of-way at the other corners, and unfortunately, these things are, if you start to make changes in one place, you might be forced to make changes in other places. So the county will take responsibility of advancing that.
Great. Glad to hear it's coming soon because it is a problematic light. It does not detect bicycles in any way, shape, or form, for instance. Any other commissioner questions? Commissioner Muradovic.
Yeah, hi. I was wondering what your experience was at comparable facilities in terms of parking lot usage, like visitors coming, because you are applying for a lower amount of parking spots than is required. And I was wondering how you arrived at that number.
Yes, thank you. It's a great question. So we operate about 275 buildings across the country, and so we have a tremendous amount of data around parking lot usage.
Mm-hmm.
And we find that having a ratio of about 0.5 or a little bit higher is usually the sweet spot in terms of having sufficient parking for both employees and visitors. So here we have 99 units and 53 spots. So we find, based on our data on other sunrises, this should be sufficient.
Yeah, I mean, you have the data, but it seems like an excessive number, even with your request for fewer spots. I mean, I don't know how many the Vitality building has on Wilson up here, maybe 0. I don't know if there's an underground parking garage, but it's at 1.33 max employees. The residents, unfortunately, aren't in a position to be able to drive. So it's not like an apartment building. Yeah, I mean, it's like not much I can say. You're already asking for a change to have a lower parking ratio, which I fully support. I just wish it would be even lower, even more of an even less of an impervious surface, because all of the trees you're adding are great, especially on the outbound side where you can. I just wish there was less parking and more of that. Yeah, but thank you though. And I mean, just so it won't be all negative, like I fully support the project. I mean, it's great that we're having people of all age groups to be able to live in Arlington for the full cycle. So it's not just like, young consultants in 1-bedroom apartments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. It's great. So the county supports the Port Cochère. Has VDOT approved the Port Cochère? Don't they have ultimate approval on whether there are curb cuts onto Glebe Road or not?
Karen White with Walter Phillips. We had initial conversations with VDOT. We are not increasing. We're pretty much holding the same 2 curb cuts on Glebe Road. So initial conversations were that they were okay with that. We do have to go through the formal process of getting them reviewed and approved. But
But the initial response was, as long as you're not adding more than are there today, then it should be fine. Okay, great. All right, yeah, I too hugely supportive of the project. We absolutely need more senior care units in Arlington County. There is absolutely a future where I live in this facility sometime in the future. So great to see it coming in. Looking around to see if there are any other commissioner comments or questions. Not seeing any lights. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion, which is that I move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board adopt the ordinance to approve site plan 22-00007, which is SP number 473, to permit the construction of up to approximately 1.06 FAR total density for an assisted living facility, including approximately 96,291 square feet of residential gross floor area, 99 units, with modifications for reduced residential parking ratio, front setback, and other modifications necessary to achieve the proposed development, subject to the conditions of the attached ordinance. And furthermore, that the commission recommends that the county board approve the associated rezoning of the property from R6 and R5 to SD Special Development District.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Theo. Is there any discussion of the motion? All right, hearing none, we will move to a vote. I believe we have Commissioner Coleman virtually. Maybe not. We did at one point. Commissioner Furman.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Locker. We had
Aye.
virtually. Great. Commissioner Ludlow.
Aye.
Commissioner Maradovic.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
Commissioner Shannon.
Aye.
Commissioner Terry.
Aye.
Commissioner Theo.
Aye.
And I too will vote yes. That passes unanimously 10-0. Thank you very much to the applicant and to staff for excellent presentations and an excellent project. The commission will take approximately a 5-minute recess before we continue with our agenda, returning here at approximately 8:14. All right, Ms. Obakoya, I think everybody's back and we've hit the timeline that I said, so let's get this party started again.
All righty. So next we have an update to the transit strategic plan, and just for your information, it's no longer an action item. It is now so it's no longer an action item. It is now an information item. And joined in person, we have Paul Monnier, and virtually we have Clinton Edwards, and they both will be presenting tonight. So I don't know who's starting first though, so.
Bridget, I'll be starting.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Slat, Commissioners, good evening. My name is, as Bridget said, Clinton Edwards, and I serve as the Transit Services Manager for Arlington County and the Transit Bureau. Presenting also will be Mr. Paul Monnier, our Project Manager for the Strategic Plan. And also joining us is our Transit Bureau Chief, Ms. Lynn Rivers, and our Deputy Director of Transportation, Ms. Wei Wong, who will be here to provide any additional insight and answer any questions. So let's go ahead and get into our Arlington Transit Strategic Plan recommendations. Next slide, please, Paul. Excuse me. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is that we're going to go a little bit into the scope and the implementation, what we are doing and why we are doing it, hit on the financial planning, looking at the overall financial plan of this project, talk about our robust public engagement round 2 that we had conducted this summer during the month of June and July, talking about how we reach people and what we heard. And then we'll finish up and Paul will take over here at the recommended service changes. Next slide, please, Paul. So our desired outcomes for the transit strategic plan. If you look here on the screen, you'll see on the right-hand side, you'll see Arlington County broken up into 4 different sectors. And so, of course, those sectors are north, the west Columbia Pike area, south the Shirlington area, and then the east, the Pentagon City and Crystal City area. So our desired outcomes when we were looking to do this transit strategic plan and looking at the entire fixed route system was looking to improve service to key destinations. We wanted to simplify the network for more direct routing so that in transit terminology, that there were opportunities for more one-seat rides. When we talk about one-seat rides, it's that you board the bus from your point of origin and you're able to get to the destination without transferring to another mode, whether that be Metro bus, Metro rail, or commuter rail. A more efficient and equitable distribution of transit access and resources, make sure that we have access to all persons within the county as best we can, and then also providing more convenient and reliable transit service on off-peak hours and weekends. This last bullet point really touches upon the effects that COVID have had on transit. Previously, transit was more of a AM peak where you put out more buses, and then in the PM peak, AM rush hour, of course, 7 to 10, and then PM peak would be 4 to 7, where you put out the most buses where you're carrying the most people. As people change their travel patterns with COVID, people are coming in later. People want to use public transportation to get wherever they want to go. We looked at evening that out a little bit more. So instead of more buses just going out in the AM peak and PM peak and then coming back in, just leveling that out a little bit more and then providing more services on Saturday and Sunday. Next slide, please, Paul. All right, so the scope and the implementation. So we're going to be phasing in this transit strategic plan over 10 years. When we'll get to the end, when we go through the exact recommendations, the recommendations are prioritized based on the current service performance, the feedback we received during the fall public feedback, and also during the summer public feedback, fall 2022 and the summer 2023, and the overall system impact to the system. The phased implementation, and this is a key point that we'll have to keep coming back to as we go through this presentation, is that the phased implementation will be considering funding and other constraints. One thing that is also worth noting on this is that there is going to be an annual review of the recommendations to consider. Paul is highlighting that with the mouse right now. The plan is required by the Commonwealth's Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation to be revisited annually. So we will have an annual review each year just to make sure that the recommendations for that year actually pass the sniff test. Like, does it make sense for us to implement this recommendation in 2023 or in 2033 when we design the plan in 2023? There will be performance standards and metrics that will guide the continued restructure or possible elimination of routes. We'll get into that a little bit more as we get through the actual recommendations. And then there's always going to be the need to identify funding sources that align with operational recommendations. Next slide, please. Financial assumptions and key considerations. On the next two slides, you'll see some numbers that are basically phase out our recommendations over the cost of the next 10 years. The very first assumption that we receive from DRPT is that each year you'll see a 3% inflation factor based on the cost of running an operation. So we just used a flat 3% across the entire plan and the whole phased over 10 years. So you'll see that as we get to the next slide. There are no capital costs associated with this expansion. This third bullet point is also worth noting that this plan includes the CIP fleet expansion and the FY23 adopted CIP, which includes 7 new CNG, which is compressed natural gas range equivalent buses in FY26 and 4 in FY28. Final point on this cost assumption is that those ZEB-related costs, the zero emission buses, those costs associated with the operator and technician training is outside the scope of this analysis. This analysis is looking at the operating of ART, the fixed route system. Next bullet point, based on our FY23 fare box recovery, you'll see a line where we're estimating revenues of 13% of the operating cost based on fare box recovery. Fare box recovery is, of course, the monies that the system receives when passengers pay their fare. So we're presuming a 13% return rate of funds that we get from the fare box from passengers to cover the operating costs. Grant assumptions. So we here at Arlington County and then the Transit Bureau, we have several funding partners in which we seek grant funds when they have competitive programs. The first one you'll see here is called the NVTC Commuter Choice Program. The NVTC Commuter Choice Program has 2 programs. One is for toll payers or for projects that benefit toll payers on the I-66 corridor. That program reimburses 40% of operating costs for 2 years. We would be looking to pursue funds through that program. And then the I-395 grant reimburses 100% of operating costs for 2 years. So the I-395, similar to I-66, is to benefit the toll payers that are using the I-395 express lanes when they're paying those funds to use those lanes. Those 2 grant programs run one this year coming up is I-66. In FY24, they just closed FY23, they just closed out a 395 call for projects and project awards. So they go on odd and even years. Final bullet point here is that in these financial slides, you will see that there's no DRPT funds. Of course, this is Department of Rail and Public Transportation, as these funds are requested annually, but 2 years in arrears. So for instance, when the county submits its FY25 operating application for DRPT, that will be based on performance data, revenue, ridership, and operating costs for 2 years previous. So that would look at FY23 data, yes. And prior assistance has ranged from 13 to 16% of the operating cost. And of course, there is a cap on the amount of funds that any agency across the state actually can receive from DRPT, and that cap is 30%, but it's based on a metric and it's performance based on all transit providers across the state. Next slide, please, Paul. All right, so we got a lot of numbers here on this proposed implementation plan cost. I'll point your attention to just a few points to remember on this. If you look here at the implementation year one, FY25, and to the left, you'll see FY 2025. The way we did this is based on the recommendations that you'll see later, that the recommendations in year one would cost $1.656 million. And if you move directly to your right, where you see the 1705, there's your 3% cost indicator. So to explain this, the recommendations, if we recommended everything within that 10-year horizon, when we go from year one to year two, we still have to absorb the cost from year one to continue the year one services running into year two, and then so on and so forth. So you kind of see it escalating down throughout this chart, where we continue to make changes, and if we implement everything within the plan, you'll see it escalate, it cascades down, excuse me, all the way down to the cost net of fare revenues, just below the fair revenues line, that the total plan would cost $9,720,000 to implement all of the recommendations that we have in the transit strategic plan. On the line after that, you'll see funding required. We just talked about the grant funding. Of course, these are assumptions that we would be awarded funds through the I-66 and the I-395 commuter choice Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. As you can see, those funds go out till 32 and then end out in 35. And then the balance is from a internal funding source. We still have to decide how we will pay for the balance to take care of the cost net of fare revenues if we were to implement this entire plan for all of the recommendations. I'll stop here and see if there are any questions from what I've discussed thus far.
No, why don't you keep trucking and we'll do questions.
All right, I'll keep trucking along. Thank you very much. Next slide, please, Paul. All right, so now we're going to be comparing this to the FY 2025 to 35 adopted CIP. Of course, here you see in the yellow, you see the total cost of the plan over if we implemented it based on the implementation plan. Of course, the total cost getting to $9.7 million. You can see funding in the FY 23 CIP. The next line item, the grant funding, they're listed from FY 26 to 32. I will make note that in the grant funding in FY 23 CIP, to the variance to the CIP, in FY 33 through 35, you will see NA all the way down because the county is in the process of updating the most recent CIP. And so the current CIP goes to FY 32. The next CIP that is adopted when we go through the process and goes before the board will go get us out further into 35. So here, just this variance to the CIP, looking at the cumulative variance to the CNI. I won't go through all of the details of this. You all have the presentation, and so you can go through and crunch these numbers a little bit more at your convenience, as opposed to me crossing everyone's eyes up, trying to go through these numbers this evening at 8:29. All right, next slide, please, Paul. So while we're looking at the transit strategic plan, we also have several concurrent transit studies going on. We are updating the Title VI program within the Transit Bureau. This is our equity planning document, which is required by the Federal Transit Administration. There's also a transit signal priority project going on, which will improve service operation through traffic signal control. The zero emission bus study, fleet propulsion. It's worth noting here that the Arlington Transit Strategic Plan was built based on compressed natural gas buses, what the ZEB study, zero emissions bus study, will do is that it will guide and tell us how we would move forward with some level of a zero emission bus, and it will guide and lead how we are able to implement the recommendations in the future once that study is complete. And then also, many of you may be aware of WMATA, the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, Better Bus Network. What we are doing concurrently with this is that we are working with them to look at their year one network and their visionary network to make sure that where we have made recommendations in the Arlington strategic plans, there's not any gaps that are left based on the work. So they're both going on concurrently. Right now, it's looking like the strategic plan for Arlington will be completed prior to the year one network is being ready for WMATA. So one thing we're making sure is that we are looking at all the left, right turns and making sure that there are no gaps in service where there is sufficient bus service now. We don't want there to be the opportunity where bus service is lost in a particular area because those two studies did not have any level of synergy. Next slide, please, Paul. All right, how we got here. We came to you all in February of 2022. Just to go over this slide briefly, we went over our current conditions. We did a gaps analysis during the fall and winter of 2022. We had our service recommendation development during the winter and going into the spring. We went in and developed our final recommendations right after our public engagement this summer, which I will talk about in depth a little bit more on the next slide. Currently, we are going through and finishing up, and we have the analysis for the capital plan and operating funding plan, done. And we are shooting to submit the final transit strategic plan to DRPT this fall. Next slide, please, Paul. Public engagement this summer. We had a outstanding and a great time engaging and interacting and getting out and talking with the public this summer. We had a series of 20 plus public engagement events, pop-up events, anywhere from metro stations to a rained out event at over in the Crystal City area where there was a movie night, to farmers markets on Saturdays and Sundays. So what we did is that anywhere we thought we could grasp large amount of people, we absolutely went out and absolutely engaged those persons. There were 3 ways to participate in this. We had a virtual public meeting that was on June 21st that was the official launch of the kickoff of the public engagement. We also had an online feedback form opportunity where if persons weren't able to get out to us and get to the pop-up events, that they would actually be able to still provide some level of feedback in an online manner. And then, of course, the pop-up events. Through these events, we were able to, if you look right there in the middle of the screen, just below the gentleman with the green shirt, we had these route cards, which was actually the concept of one of our great interns, where we had passengers and folks that were interested. They had the opportunity to look at, let's say here, Route 41. They're able to look and see what was the route currently does and what did the TSP recommend it to do. So we had route cards at each of these pop-up events for each route, gave persons an opportunity to be able to look at those cards, either tell us they loved the recommendations, they did not like the recommendations, or they were neutral on their recommendations. During this engagement, we received over 1,800 comments on the proposed service changes. Just over 1,200 of those were during the online feedback form. We were able, and then the form, of course, was available in multiple languages. 595 of the forms were collected through the 18 pop-up events held throughout Arlington. And I think, to a credit to our staff and our outreach team, 35% of those form responses were received in Spanish. And finally, of course, just the places that we went out to and had an excellent time doing so: farmers markets, food distributions, and other high foot traffic areas. Next slide, please, Paul. So once we received this public engagement, we went out, we analyzed all the results, looked at every single comment that we received. The there were some key themes from the public engagement comments. We received themes from accessibility to customer service to quality of the buses, safety, and of course, free service, fare free service. What is going to be addressed by the Arlington Transit Strategic Plan, the ATSP, are going to be those needs of frequency, increased frequency, service spans, hours of operations, which we'll touch on in a few moments, and connectivity, being able to get persons where they would like to go in a more timely manner. So this is what we heard through the public engagement. And so at this point, we will get actually into the recommendations. So I will stop talking and I will pass it over to Mr. Paul Munier to get into the actual recommendations.
Good evening. My name is Paul Mounier. I'm the service planner for the ART bus system. I appreciate you letting us come out and talk to you this evening. I just want to make a comment about the public outreach. One of the stats that I really like about the public outreach is WMATA is doing their Better Bus Network, and they had 8,000 some engagements through their Better Bus Network outreach. And of those 8,400 were in Arlington County. And with our outreach, we clearly increased that by about 5 times. So I was really happy with how that worked out. It's probably the best outreach I've been part of. I also want to make it clear, we've talked about this a little bit. This is something that we look at every year. And the outreach is over. We're here to get your input. But even after that, the discussion isn't over. And it isn't over when the document's adopted, because every year we're coming back to talk about exactly where we are and what we need to do to implement things. As you're aware, the TDP was from 2016 to 2023. I arrived here in 2019, and I can tell you something, for some reason, we didn't implement a lot of the things that were shown in that TDP. As a matter of fact, we were taking services offline. So I want to make it absolutely clear, the discussion doesn't end here tonight. It doesn't end when it's adopted, and it doesn't end until we're doing our next one. So we will constantly be talking about routes and what is the best way to implement them. Just a couple highlights of some of the things that we heard during the outreach. The 75 and 77, both a lot of comments on needing frequency and weekend service. The 77 only runs on Saturday on the weekend. And we heard that the multiple people talked about having Sunday service. The 75 is been one of our fastest growing routes. I don't think in any small part to the fact that we are providing service to Kenmore, which is our best, where we are picking up the most students. So I obviously we have that as a priority, but a surprising amount of people use that to get from Ballston to the Shirlington area. One of the things I unfortunately don't think we were able to include in this is a lot of people wanted a more direct connection from Ballston to Shirlington, but we do have the 72, but for some reason they really like this route, so that's why we chose to improve that. Route 54, in line with the 72, we are extending that to Ballston to provide a 1-seat ride. It will overlap the 72 a little bit. And then in the morning and the afternoon, we are going to talk about having diversions to the 2 schools in the west of Glebe Road, Yorktown, and there's another one there, to provide a few school trips in the morning and in the afternoon by diverting that to provide trips to those areas. And then the last bullet here, you will see plans for ART 55. Plans will be adjusted to balance with regional Metro bus service based on proposals informed by the Better Bus Network study. And this is one where we had a recommendation and we've pulled that recommendation back because of wanting to enhance these other services, looking at the investment we're making in the North County. And the fact that WMATA shows reluctance to run in areas where we're already running service. So with, some discussions we've had with the Better Bus Network, we are still discussing the 55 and that whole area. So we want to be very careful moving forward with that recommendation at this time. So let me go through and let me ask you how you would like to do this. I can go through all the recommendations. I have them broken up by short, medium, and long term with their costs here, and I can discuss that. And I could go through each one and stop and take questions, or would you like to try to go through all of these because in the essence of time, I know there's going to be a lot of questions, and it's up to you how you want. You know what I'm saying? It's up to you how you would like to do it. If you want to go all the way through or ask questions as we go.
Yeah, so let's ask questions as we go now that we're into specific route proposals.
Okay. Route 41 and 45, as you're aware, they just were boosted up for the change to the 16M to go through the neighborhoods and provide that frequency that was dropped when the G and H came out of the neighborhoods. There is a proposal later in this, so this really isn't part of this year's proposal. There is a proposal that comes up later for adding frequency to the weekends on both these routes. Route 53 and Route 61. Route 53 and Route 61, eliminating low utilization stops on the West Leg of Route 53 and on 61, increasing the frequency and span of service. And just, you'll see that these both are in blue, and that's because they would need to be implemented together if we're eliminating service on the 61 to have something cover that. Just when I say low utilization stops on the west leg, on the segment that was going towards East Falls Church from the north, you are talking about stops getting less than one passenger per day on average. So really low use in that area. And that's why we eliminated that. And then wanting to cover the 61 and bringing that over to Roslyn. So I know there's some questions here.
Yeah, I think my main question is like, I've never understood the route of the 61 or what its goal is. Can you talk about that 61 route, which is kind of like a circle in like Roslyn Courthouse, and what it's trying to achieve?
I think it's trying to achieve being essentially a shuttle to both Roslyn and Courthouse for the population in that area.
All right, so the goal is to get kind of off the RB corridor a bit into those neighborhoods that are maybe a little far to necessarily walk into the corridor and get them to a metro station?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Do other folks have questions about these routes so far?
Yeah, I just have a general question. It seems like the Madison Center is becoming a focal point in some of the proposals for turnaround. I'm just wondering what the configuration looks like there and.
I don't know if we would go into the center. The way that the 53 kind of goes through that area right now is how it would go through there. So we don't want to go onto the property of the center, but we would go by it, and it would look similar to what is up there currently. I've sketched it out. I haven't done the full planning for that yet. This is a high level plan at this point, but it does appear possible without going into the center.
The elimination of the low utilization stops on the west leg of the 53, the proposal in the future is to replace that with the microtransit pilot. Is that true?
Yeah, that is a recommendation from the previous TSP, for like 26, they were talking about microtransit pilots throughout the county. In addition to that, I think some minor rerouting of the 52 in that area would help out a little bit.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Great, onward.
All right. Route 75, increase weekday frequency, improve service to Wakefield High School and Kenmore Middle Center by providing trips if needed. We have one right now at Kenmore, but I think with the frequency increase, we probably wouldn't need to add any additional units to that. And go ahead. But,
Commissioner Furman.
My fault.
Yeah, on Route 75, so I've noticed on here that we're listing increased weekday frequency. One of the previous recommendations was to implement some weekend service as well, given that that ridership has gone up quite a bit. Is that something that's targeted for the short term? I know in a few slides for the long term, there's a note on increasing weekend frequency, but would this also be beginning?
Yeah,
weekend
so,
frequency?
well, this would be increases in weekday service because that's where we heard the necessity for it. And the 77, which is right under it, would be increases to the weekend service. And then in the later out years, increases to frequency on the 77, increases to 75 on the weekend.
So when would you anticipate the introduction of weekend service on the 75?
Let me see, is it long term? So probably 30, 28, 29 maybe.
And what, sorry, can you quantify increased weekday frequency more closely? Are we talking 20 minutes or?
Yeah, it goes from 30 minutes or better, getting 20 minutes or better in the morning and in the afternoon during when the schools are
Great.
getting out.
All right, onward.
Okay. I'm looking at an older version of this. I will go back and look. I think it's actually a longer span of 20-minute service during the weekday. So I believe we went all day with that. Okay. Next route, extend Route 84 to Shirlington, transform into express route to Pentagon City. Basically, this will remain our only peak period route. We are converting all the other peak period routes to full day with 30-minute frequencies at minimum. And this is also to try to leverage some of the connections that other people are making, WMATA and Dash are making at Shirlington to provide an express route from Shirlington. All right, Route 85 is a new route serving the Shirlington Transit Center through Aurora Hills and Crystal City, and it is backfilling some eliminated WMATA service. However, at the Better Bus Network discussion, I was a little surprised about they were taking all the service off of 23rd Street, and which would leave us with a far lower frequency there. So we're working with them on that. There's a 10B that takes 23rd, and then the 23T, which comes down and takes 23rd also. They were talking about routing the 23T straight to Potomac Yards to give that a very fast cross-county connection from Ballston to Potomac Yards. And then the 10B was routing up through Pentagon City and not going over to Crystal City. That needs to have some discussion, but that's also why this is put so far in the front of the implementation plan.
Commissioner Pertman, go ahead.
Looking at the map, it looks like the 84, after it gets rerouted to go into Shirlington, might then go out onto 395. Is that correct? Or is that going to go up Army Navy Drive?
It would go 395.
Okay, so the idea is to make that a little bit more of a direct express.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
As long as we're talking about the 84, I struggle to explain what the 84 does west of Shirlington to people. Has there been any thought to simplifying that route? In Douglas Park, it does all sort, it feels like it draws squiggles.
Yeah, and it does. And there has been, we have looked at it previously, and anything you do, you're going to lose coverage. And it's been a while since I looked at it. But I know that there have been proposals out there that people didn't like, and it is a little strange, but the people who ride it seem to like it the way it is, So I'm hesitant to go in there. I think, if we were going to do something, is maybe hook that some way up to Columbia Pike so that you could come through that neighborhood and then to the Pentagon. But again, we didn't do a lot of changes to the 84. We kept it as the only peak period route and trying to boost a little ridership with the express part of it.
Gotcha. Yeah, strongly supportive of putting it on. It's going to be in the express lanes of 395, right? So that it's not sitting in traffic.
Yeah, if it can get on to the express lanes, there's no reason it wouldn't use it.
Great. But yeah, I know there's always this tension between efficiency and coverage and all of that. And if it's hard to change a route out from underneath riders, I just worry that there are more riders waiting out there who would ride it if it made any lick of sense to anyone. I just, I know a lot of people in Douglas Park that I mentioned, the 84 goes through Douglas Park, and they're like, oh, where? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't explain to you where the 84 goes, because it doesn't make any sense to me. So I hope maybe, again, we revisit this every year. At some point, we'll take another look at simplifying this route, because part of being able to encourage other people to take transit is being able to explain, in a couple sentences where they can get on that bus, and I can't do that with the 84 right now.
Right, and I can probably give you a better explanation at some point on why it is, because I remember talking to William when he was here about it. I've also found that, it's interesting because I spent a lot of time out in the field during this outreach, and people that English is a second language, have trouble reading English or reading period, can somehow figure out how to take two buses from, Columbia Pike and end up in somewhere in DC. And sometimes you just have to go out there and try it. So, but I agree. It is a weird route, but this was one it's not broke, don't fix it.
Awesome. Anybody? All right. Onward.
Okay. The 87, essentially with the 87, we're simplifying the routing and numbering for easier planning. When this route came in, there was a 15-minute frequency promised on the route. Unfortunately, they didn't have enough buses to provide 15-minute frequency, so they had these crazy short trips and deadhead in service, the X, coming back. To fix that, just essentially put the number of buses that are required and run it correctly. All right. Route 42, expanding hours of service to provide a more consistent schedule. This isn't a significant expansion of service. It is, there are hours being added to the schedule to make the bus more reliable. And I know there was some questions about moving the terminus of the 42 to Pentagon City and Crystal City, and that is when I talked to WMATA, like they have routes that people don't want to stop at Pentagon City and they want to go to the Pentagon. And quite frankly, when I was out talking to people, I never heard someone say, I want to go to Pentagon City. It was all, you know, this was a good route the way it is. So, you know, going back and looking at some of the online comments, it's the trade-off is, I think it still needs to end at the Pentagon, but the trade-off would be, do you make that stop at Pentagon City and then go to the Pentagon? And are you going to get, because it's this real, WMATA gets the same thing. People who want to work direct ride to the Pentagon are going to yell at, they don't get their direct ride to the Pentagon. People that want to go to Pentagon City, it's like, well, it's right there. Why don't you just go to Pentagon City? So it's when we go for implementation, that's something we can look at.
Yeah, I think my question there is, do you know, are the riders that you're getting on the 42 like Pentagon employees, or are they just trying to connect to Yellow Line, Blue Line, Metro?
To be honest with you, a lot of them were going to DHS, to Sequoia. And you know, and they would be, you know, workers in Pentagon City, but we have the weekend service there. I assume it works for them, but again, I didn't hear that much, and I don't know. To me, it doesn't seem like the Pentagon is a big attractor right now with the way you know, commuting patterns have changed. So again, this would be something open when we go into planning. You know, we would try to do a small public outreach, suggest that, and then go from there.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's really worth looking at. Sorry, I ride the 42 a fair amount because it was one of the most convenient buses to my house. And so I see, you know, it is 100% like a DHS connector. Like the biggest bus stop is always like people getting on and off at Sequoia, which makes total sense. And I just think, you know, it can also be a workhorse for these neighborhoods that it has to go through in order to get to Sequoia, connecting them to useful destinations. And I use it constantly to get to Clarendon and Ballston. And I have never have any reason to go to the Pentagon. And it feels like the Pentagon adds this massive amount of time to the trip, right? Like getting onto the Pentagon reservation is this like weird circuitous, you know, trip on the bus. And it just feels like it might be both more efficient from a time perspective and potentially more useful if it were going to a metro station that wasn't just a metro station, but also a destination in its own right. And since it doesn't seem like I see a lot of military on the bus, it seems like maybe they're not intentionally going to the Pentagon. They're trying to just go to Metro or whatever. So I think that's worth a look. Commissioner Furman, I think you had your hand up as well.
I did, and it was mostly to second what Chris had just mentioned, is that I've ridden on the 42 a number of times, and I think the route that it goes into the Pentagon is much more circuitous now than it was a few years ago, and I think that that slowed the efficiency down quite a bit, especially for instances when I'm trying to just get to the Metro. That would be a much more annoying route than the weekend route coming to Pentagon City, but I do also understand we want to potentially provide that single ride to the Pentagon if that's a driver to do so. But yeah, just seconding what he had said.
Understood.
Commissioner Thea.
Yes, also just a second Chair Slat's comments about the 42. It is my main bus route in Arlington to get between Clarendon and Pentagon City. And I also see that it is primarily serves Sequoia. That's where I see a lot of people getting on and getting off halfway through the route. And I dread taking it every time I do because it stops off at the Pentagon and really slows things down, and it's pretty much impossible for me to then get off at Pentagon and get over to Pentagon City. Even though I have no desire to ever stop off at the Pentagon, it's sort of forces me to. And yeah, anything that could be done to have more of a direct route between, say, Clarendon, where I am, and Pentagon City, because Arlington does not have those really good sort of north-south connector routes along that corridor. 42 is almost there, but with that stop at the Pentagon and sort of the snake through the parking lot and then sitting at the Pentagon bus bays for minutes. Yeah, it's not a great route. It could be though.
Anybody else? All right, onward.
Okay, understood. Thank you for those comments. 43, extend express service to Clarendon Metro, serve commuters. The main comment that we received on this was take it all the way to Boston. The problem is Boston has so much service that we're trying not to bring more service to Boston, and there's a lot of service along Wilson and Clarendon already, but that by far was the biggest comment we got here. And I would like to, but there is so much demand for Boston, not just from WMATA, not just from ART, but Fairfax Connector wants to come there. Other people want to come there. So that's I guess the place to be.
I'm sorry, it's really hard to keep all of these changes in my head all at one time. But are we not removing some service that currently works out of Boston? With like the 51 or the 52 or
52 comes out.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to get into too much detail. I'm just wondering, are we freeing up some space in Boston with other cuts that give us an opportunity to run some more service to Boston?
The 52 comes out, the 72 is already there. The 53, the 54 now goes there. I think we end out about even with the routes going there, route being taken out, route being put in. We could, again, we could take a look at it. I just know that that is real. It's a bottleneck there. And the less we can do to less we can do to make it less complicated, I'd like to do that. And, like I said, by far, once we get to implementation, we can look again at what Boston is at, where it's at, and maybe we can get in there because, like I said, that by far the biggest comment we received. All right. Route 51 redesigned to connect to East Falls Church, Virginia Hospital Center, and Roslyn, increase frequency of span of service, restore connection to Swanson Middle School, and serve gap eliminated on ART Route 61. We talked about that a little bit earlier with 61, but essentially trying to provide a larger area, having more bus service over a larger area without reducing the frequency to the hospital. One of the things with what we're doing up here in the north is trying to, even though the hospital doesn't have a transit center, it has a pretty nice bus stop on the side near, near the hospital, trying to utilize that to bring a lot of service together there so you can make connections. Route 52, extend to Clarendon, serve gap from the ART 62, increase frequency and service hours. So yeah, I know very circuitous route, but picking up where the 62 would be eliminated, trying to provide that frequency. And I think one of the themes in here in the north area is really increasing span of service and saying, we know that service hasn't been great. These have been lower performing routes, but they've also been just commuter routes with kind of weird headways, 45 minutes, 22 minutes, whatever. We need to put, minimum fixed route service out there, see if it can work, and, evaluate this 18 months after we put it in and say, this is your time to ride. you're getting the best service you're ever going to have out here, unless something happens and you know, really ride the bus. This 30-minute, 12 hours a day, if you could maintain that, we can keep it out here. If not, we really have to have some serious discussions on how, if we want to provide alternate transportation to this area of the county that is this suburban cul-de-sac area, how are we going to do it? So, you know, I have faith in the recommendations, but I understand they will be evaluated. So just to be clear with that. For new service to cover gap on the 72 serves Williamsburg, Yorktown, and Marymount. And you can see here, this is the deviation that we would have during the morning and afternoon to serve the schools up here. One school here and a middle school here. I believe this is Yorktown up here, and then a middle school down here, I believe, and then go directly to Ballston. The reason the 72 has been cut back, and I know there was some comments about keeping that going all the way to Marymount. It kind of just stops in the middle of the road, and that segment has not been good for the 72. And quite frankly, it was our operations staff, when I talked to them, they said, you know, if you can get rid of that piece going all the way up there, it would really help on our timing. So it was an operational decision, as well as trying to provide more connection to the hospital. And yeah, I 54 is basically a shuttle to Ballston from that north area to try to provide some coverage that was lost.
All right, can I get into that a little bit? It feels like the old 72 is just getting split in half, right? That now the 72 is like the southern half of the 72, and now the 54 is the north half of the 72. So what are we, I think I'm not quite understanding what we're gaining by just splitting it into two routes. And I know other changes are being made, and I'm 100% supportive of the other changes, going to VHC, all that sort of thing. But like, it just feels like we're splitting a route in half for no reason.
It's like I said, this was something our operational team really said would be an improvement. I honestly, you know, I look at this and I get the same thing. Why not just, you know, run it all the way up? But it was kind of looking at all the options. What you're getting is a better connection to, you're getting another connection to the hospital. You're going to get a more efficient route. And we're going to lose this area that really hasn't, I mean, the 54 takes over an area that really hasn't been productive. What it is you're not gaining anything, but you're not losing service on that segment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm having trouble understanding the operational discussion if the 54 is operating in the same area. Okay, are we just having the same operational problem, but with a different route number on it?
Well, because the 72 goes all the way to the south, I think it's easier for the 54 to recover. It would run on, we wouldn't have the problems that we're having with the timing on the 72 if we do this. That was the main thing. You know, we talked with the consultant. We talked around in circles a little bit about this. I think this is the best idea. Maybe not, and maybe when we get to this implementation, we need to take another look at it, see how. So this is in the mid, you know, implementation period, which would be probably 26, 27, or 27, 28. And we'll have some of the other routes in place, and maybe we can see. But that's kind of what the best I can tell you.
I appreciate it. Like, I'm just like, this is literally a, like, I just, like, there must be a reason here, and I just need the opportunity to ask and understand the reason.
Right.
And I feel like now I do to some extent, and that it's about staying on schedule. And that when it's two separate routes, there's an opportunity to have that like layover where you get back on schedule, and whatnot. I just think it is a shame that we're losing that one seat ride opportunity of going from Shirlington to far north Arlington without having to get off and get onto connect to a different bus. So I won't belabor the point. It's been fully understood, and now I understand more the reasoning. Does anybody else have anything on this slide? Okay, onward. Oh, Commissioner Maradovic.
Yeah. Going back to the proposed microtransit, given the example of like a lot of other cities, it doesn't seem like it's really worked out for them. In your preparation for this, did you find like a positive example of where it was successful?
PRTC right now has a example that I need to talk to my colleague Perrin, who's the planner for PRTC, but they eliminated some service in Manassas, and they have been real happy with the way microtransit is worked there. My understanding was they were saving some money. Like I said, this was originally proposed in the 2016 to 2023 TDP for implementation in 2026, and they had 3 different areas of microtransit. We need to go back and look at this again because technology has come a long way also. And I will admit there's one difficulty that I have with this is some microtransit areas, when you look at these other counties, are half the size of Arlington County. We're a small county. And the reason we want to do a pilot, the reason we want to do a study is to see how it works. It has been a popular suggestion. People in general are like, oh, yes, this is a good idea. And what I've said about this is I don't anticipate it being a door-to-door Uber ride type situation. What you were going to do is you will pick up in your neighborhood, maybe at your door, or maybe at a designated stop, and then you will go to like East Falls Church, you can go to the hospital, you can go to Boston, and you're being fed into the high frequency regional network and go from there. This is really a last mile, first mile, last mile, just a little too far to walk, just a little too far to bike, and you know, if I don't want to ride a scooter, I don't. But yeah, really a curb to transit hub situation is what I feel very strongly about when we try to implement this.
Yeah, and will that be like some art minivan, or like who will be? Will you contract that out?
We're doing studies right now. A lot of these agencies, what they are now is they provide just the software, which is essentially the what you would call it, your Uber app, and then you apply it over the top of what you're doing. It can be used for paratransit. It can be used for this microtransit. There is, Clint's going to talk about the discussion with the STAR group, and there's a contract coming up soon, and maybe having this as an option. But we are revisiting what was talked about previously because of the technology. And also I want to be very, very cautious that this is not an Uber Lyft situation. It is to have that last mile connection when it's just a little too far for you to get to the high frequency network.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. As long as we're on this slide, then I will just go ahead and, oh, Commissioner Furman, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Just a quick point of clarification on the last piece on the slide. It says the zone will cover gaps for eliminated service in South Arlington. Is that meant for Northwest Arlington? I just want to make sure I'm understanding where we're talking about.
Yeah, it's Northwest Arlington. Okay. And there is one other area just here, I believe south of 50 that we're looking at also. That's a it showed up on a lot of our gap analysis. There's an apartment building just south of 50 that's in this neighborhood that has no connections to like the outside. And then, you know, to get to 50 is very difficult. So that one building that is kind of in the west of Arlington would be looked at also. But right now, like I said, pilot, we're still working towards it.
Is that building somewhere near Kenmore? I'm
It
guessing
is-
based off of where
it is
you're
like-
looking.
I think this is 50 right here. It is like right here.
Okay. Yeah, so
It's-
somewhere in
Yeah,
that
that
vicinity.
that census block.
Thank you.
Great, cool. As long as we're on this slide, I would just go ahead and say, I would love to hear more about PRTC's successful microtransit pilot, because at the moment I am extremely skeptical of microtransit, having seen nothing but a series of failed pilots in other areas, where the microtransit ended up being more expensive than the admittedly not great fixed route service that it replaced. So before we go down this road and just fail like everybody else, I would really want to see some evidence of success elsewhere before we head that direction. Though I do understand Arlington is often a unique snowflake and we are different than other places that have tried stuff. Yay, 26 square miles of crazy town. Commissioner Ludlow, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple. So I'm going to go back to a little bit of a high level here. Looking at the overall strategies, this is a strategic plan. And there are some express goals, but I didn't feel like they were maybe ambitious enough to match some of Arlington's broader ambitions related to housing, related to car-free living. To me, the plan really seems like it seems important, but it seems like a lot of tinkering with routes and not necessarily a strategic plan per se in terms of kind of shifting the conversation or having some type of ambitious change in mode share and behavior. So that's just a comment. If you'd like to respond, you can. That's just an observation. And then I have two other points, but if you want to talk about that one, you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a trade-off. We know what works. We know that some stuff works in Arlington. Like I said, we are going to be reviewing this. Like I said, I wanted to give an opportunity to people, the places that have service already, and what I will let my deputy director chime in here when.
Hi, good evening. Sorry, I'm a little bit hard at talking, but I totally agree with the comment that we want to make the cultural change, but the cultural change has to come built step by step with increased service and sort of a methodical way. Transit is a type of sort of human behavior that's built upon habit. So great shift of either routes or service, I would say pattern may not be beneficial. So you may see incremental things, we're chipping at it. And before you notice, then, the service running all 7 days and the frequency is, being improved. So I think that partially address your comment, although I know this doesn't totally address it, partially address your comment about more grander type of action.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I would also be interested, and maybe this is even an offline conversation, in just kind of the analytical and data approach that was taken. If this is about behavioral change and understanding the patterns that people are using, I would just be curious to know kind of how you're addressing that from an analytical perspective, since the tools and data continue to improve at a very granular level to look at these kinds of things.
Points taken.
Okay.
Thank you.
Two more. Now I'll go more detailed. 55, I didn't see it in here. Is 55 good to go? It's out 12-minute headways, I think. I take 55 sometimes. I think Commissioner Lantelmi knows about 55. Do you have any plans there, or is it the thinking that, you know, that one's okay, because with the, again, the plans that Arlington has for Langston Boulevard, you want to think about kind of whether there's a service element there that needs to be increased. And Commissioner Land, tell me if you know more about this, then chime in.
Yeah, I'd love to. Actually, the plan was just released as we were meeting. It'll be considered for the RTA at the Planning Commission next week. What we're pushing for with for the 55 and for any service along Langston Boulevard is increased headways. And I know there's, during rush hours, there's a decent headway, maybe is the best way to put it, but the middle of the day, weekends, it's really, really pretty bad. There's no incentive to use the bus during those other hours. We'd also like to see something that would encourage more usage, such as simple things such as having a shelter at each stop. There are some now, but it's not up and down the corridor. If we could long range look at things like, signal priorities, all door boarding, prepayment, not a full BRT because there's not room there for that. But some of the aspects of that would be useful along the 55. I think, it is premium transit, and it could be made even more so by some things that presumably aren't huge cost. They are more costly, but some huge, more cost. But I think you get a lot of bang for the buck. We're looking to have a lot more people live up and down that corridor. If the plan goes through and it's executed the way we hope, we're going to be seeing a lot more multifamily buildings along the corridor, and they'll be right at the bus stops. And the whole point of the corridor is to encourage non-car usage. That it's more walkable, it's more transit oriented, and the 55 will be a key component of making that vision actually occur. Right now, that service really, the current service won't support that. And I get that maybe the riders aren't there today, but long range, we should at least be thinking what should it be to support what our vision is, and having maybe a placeholder that the 55 can and should be more as the development occurs.
Go ahead.
Lynn has her hand up.
Please, Ms. Rivers, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate the comments about the 55. I just wanted to share that transit has been involved with the planned Langston Boulevard corridor planning and looking at all of the transit implications and improvements that can be done in that corridor. So we are planning to look at very closely about how things are changing and how that service is going to morph. Because you're right, there is a lot of potential in that corridor. As we moved in taking it over from Metro service some years ago, we knew that it was going to grow even further. And just wanted to also share with you, you mentioned transit signal priority, the other TSP that we talk about, and the Langston Boulevard corridor is the area where we're planning to do one of our first pilots, if not the first pilot, if I remember correctly, for signal priority. And that should be coming up within the next 12 months. So that's underway as well. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Great. I'm really happy to hear that. And I will urge that the planners actually mention that or say that in the plan Langston Boulevard, so that, we have it there and that it acknowledges that you're doing that. So thank you for including Langston Boulevard in that pilot.
Great. I would also remind commissioners that the ART 55 was mentioned earlier in the presentation as something that they are balancing with WMATA as far as like what's going to be Metro bus service and what's going to be the 55 as far as combined frequency on Langston Boulevard. All right. Shall we move on?
Just to follow on that just a little bit more, it is, looking for 10-minute frequencies in the planning area. Are there places where, do you want to go off the off Langston Boulevard to provide some connection to neighborhoods. And when we're talking about 10-minute frequencies, it's not every route is going to have 10-minute frequencies. It's the overlay of all the routes. And that is why we really want to be careful about balancing with WMATA, because they have a tendency to walk away if we're taking up too much service. They need riders also, and we want to encourage them to join with us, especially on a very busy corridor such as Langston Boulevard. And then I think I see Glenn with his hand up if you want.
Mr. Edwards, please go ahead.
Yes, Chair Slide, I was just going to request that if we could pick up our pace on this. We have about 6 more slides left on this one, and just in the interest of time, because we have still several slides left and we're past 9 o'clock at this point.
I concur. Let's move on to the next slide. Thank you.
I had a feeling this would, I apologize. I will try to move a little faster, but I do want to make sure that you all have the opportunity to provide it. But 41 and 45, increasing the weekend frequencies to fill a gap from eliminated services. Essentially, this is the continuation of the increases to 41 and 45. This right here is more of a discussion point than a recommendation. When BRT is established on Route 7, it will go to East Falls Church, but there is no great connection from this area in Arlington County to get onto BRT, which can take you all the way to Tyson's Corner, all the way into Alexandria on a 1-seat ride. And I don't think we want to necessarily run service outside the county, but I am absolutely certain that we need to have discussions about how we are going to connect one of our largest transit riding populations to this service, this great regional service. So this is a discussion point, and if it comes to where we need to find a way to run this, we will. The 16M at this point runs this. There were some early in the visionary network, they didn't have this connection, and that's why it ended up here. But I think there's even better ways we could do this, and it is a discussion point. Sorry. 74, provide all-day service along Columbia Pike, connect to Crystal City and to Long Bridge. This is going from a peak period service to a full day service, and providing connections further into Pentagon City and Crystal City. 77, 75, again, that's the second part of their increases, weekend and weekday as shown. And 85, connecting to Potomac Yards. This will give you a complete ride, 1-seat ride from Shirlington. There are some services that Alexandria does provide from Shirlington. And this again is in response to some things we saw in the Better Bus Network that indicated that the frequencies from Potomac Yards along the Metroway and some of the other connections might not be where we would like them to be. We wouldn't run along the Metroway, but we would provide this service to provide a little bit of additional service if the frequencies weren't there. Not trying to compete with train or other bus services, but trying to bring the frequencies up to where we think they would need to be with this important connection. And that is the last slide in the recommendations.
Great. I will throw a couple things in here. One is that I am always in favor of improved service on the 77. So really happy to see eventual increased weekday frequencies, even if it's in the out years. And we'll just say that the 74 is another one of those routes that I have trouble explaining to people. Really excited that we're going to get to Longbridge Aquatic Center. I think it's important that we be servicing that from a transit standpoint. I am a little sad that it is the 74 that is the one that is getting there, because it just is another one of those ones that, you know, diverts into the neighborhoods at seemingly random times in an effort to gain coverage in a way that makes it difficult to explain to people like where they can pick it up.
And you know, I think I understand that. And when you talk about that, I mean, which, you know, it is a little bit different. I think what the thinking is that I have is if you can make it to Pentagon City, if you can make it to Crystal City, then you have your connection. I know it's not a one-seat ride, but not everybody in the county could have a one-seat ride. We can't have 3 routes from 3 different areas. So I do absolutely understand that. And the 74, it's really a couple of those neighborhoods it diverts into have some elderly folks in it that have, you know, as a peak period service, it does them no good, and they want to get into that Pentagon City area. So, you know, just putting that extension on, it's, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Maybe not the greatest route, but I balancing everything else out, I felt like that was the way to go.
All right. Anybody else on long-term changes here?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I think on Route 45 and 85, I think that's great. The fact that we'd be going into other counties, moving Arlington residents into another county and bringing them back instead of just leaving at the border. But particularly 85, I'm keen on that one. I think, you know, to the point you make, not to compete, but it makes sense. So just I appreciate that.
What's next?
Okay, here we go. Okay. Basically the statistics of what we're doing, 39% increase in total service hours. You can see the weekend, Saturday and Sunday increase. And you can see the cost, and that is an annual operating cost that we're talking about. So it's significant. One of the things that, you know, that you will notice about this, we aren't doing those, the fleet will expand some. It won't expand a lot because of the way that this is, it's the way people are traveling weekday, middays and stuff. We're not packing the peak with service, but there's still a lot of hours. So, you know, I know that you don't see like a lot of buses being bought, there'll be some bought, but there are a lot of hours being put on the street to really beef up the service that is out there. So just so that we, you know, we all understand, and you can see this is with the Metro service overlaid on top of our service, and you can see the blue line, how much Metro service there is in the county. I think they provide about 65 to 68% of the service in the county, and we really want to leverage the, you know, their high frequency service and you know, provide connections so that Arlingtonians can use that service. These slides are basically the same thing that we just talked about, just put in a different way, showing by area versus by time period. So we'll skip through those, and then I will just turn this back over to Clinton or Lynn to close us out.
Thank you very much, Paul. And so just looking at our next steps, a couple of the stakeholder groups that we have brought this before. We talked to the Transit Advisory Committee on September the 12th. And then, of course, we're talking to you all, the Transportation Commission, tonight. And then final step, board adoption of the Arlington Strategic Plan for November 2023. So this sums up our presentation on our Arlington Strategic Plan. Any other questions?
I've got a couple. So this was originally on our agenda as an action item. It is now an info item, which means that there's not an expected vote from the commission on this at this meeting. Does that mean you're coming back to see us again before it goes to the board for adoption?
If you would like us to, we could definitely come back. I think we had an aggressive idea of how soon we could get to the board after we closed out our outreach, and that was right at the end of July. And we've been pushing to, and originally while this was an action item, we thought we were going to be here to be able to go in October, but obviously I don't think it's quite there yet. So yeah, I mean, if you would like us to, I think that would be fine for us to come back.
It's been my experience that the board is very interested in a recommendation from the commission on important documents like the transit strategic plan. Ms. Rivers, did you have something to add? Thought I saw your hand.
No, I'm sorry, Chair Slide. I hit it by mistake.
No worries. And then I think that's the only additional question I had. Commissioner Maradovic, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question, not route related. In terms of the electric buses, I mean, we're talking about strategic stuff. So is that a topic of conversation we can have? Because I know that was a separate item on that one slide. Like,
what this is focused on is service, and then the study on the propulsion is, and I.
Ms. Rivers, you want to take over for this poor guy?
Yes, I thought I'd just jump in on this. So we've got a number of studies that are going on happening at the same time with the transit strategic plan. And one of them is a zero emission bus feasibility study where we're trying to mesh all of these plans together. So we have ordered 4 battery electric buses that we plan to pilot. We anticipate we will get them with the completion of our operations and maintenance facility, which we are expecting to be complete in early calendar year 25. So we've got the strategic plan, we've got electric buses that we plan to pilot, and we've got a new facility at the same time. So this plan, as Paul was getting ready to say, is strictly looking at service. And then obviously we're looking at what kind of vehicles would be needed to facilitate the service going forward. So it was not specifically looked at as to what kind of propulsion will be used, because that's being looked at in another plan. But we anticipate all of that coming together, and maybe not by the time, well, I would say probably not by the time that the transit strategic plan is adopted, but it is a part of an ongoing fulsome look at all transit, all services and ways to implement transit.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to separate electric buses from the service discussion, especially when we see what happened in DC with the circulator and then them having to cut service because of the expense of the buses. The question I had is, I believe the pilot is with Proterra and they recently declared bankruptcy. How does that affect? No?
No, the buses that we've ordered are from Gillig,
Okay.
which is a great manufacturer of buses, and all of the work. Actually, they were part of the demonstration that we had back last fall and back during the winter. And so we are planning and have issued a PO to purchase buses from Gillig. And yes, we are aware with the fact that with the issues that Proterra has had, that also has a domino effect on this industry as far as getting battery electric buses. So we're glad that we've gotten in the queue in order to get buses, but we still don't know what that impact might be as other transit agencies might be rolling over to the handful of manufacturers that are out there.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the points in this strategic plan is the increase in service. And I'd like the focus to remain on that. I prefer other localities to be the guinea pigs on these electric buses. We need I would like for us to stick with what's reliable, what works, and what's proven, and to promote that modal shift from. I think that's the bigger picture in terms of better environmental outcomes. I mean, it would be awesome if electric buses were cheap, did not require new staff, new facilities, and were as reliable. But I think it's important to have running buses. That's the biggest priority, at least for me.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
I'd like to associate myself with Commissioner Moradovic's comments. I agree 100%. The best bus is the bus that we can use. The more buses, the better.
I will also associate myself with Commissioner Radrick's remarks. And then I think I have two other comments that I want to make. One is that this commission loves field trips. And so if we can weasel our way into like a tour of the new art operations facility when it opens, we're like 100% on board for that. And then the second is that we're big supporters of transit here on the commission. Part of our job, right, is helping our fellow residents understand all of these transportation issues and, what is happening in this TSP and what this new service means. And so I will make a plea that I made the last time we did a big TDP update, which is please give us more useful metrics on how this service affects our neighbors. I understand why there are statistics in here on like percentage increase in service hours, but it does not help me have this conversation with my neighborhood and with my neighbors about what this TSP update means. I need stuff like under our previous service, 30% of Arlingtonians could get to a metro station in less than 20 minutes on transit during peak hours, and now 75% of them can. Or maybe it's that statistic, but also because we're expanding evening service, now it's that statistic, but in the evening. It used to be, this tiny percentage of Arlingtonians were within easy reach of a metro stop in the evenings, but now because we're expanding evening service, it's a much bigger percentage. Or maybe it's about weekend service. I need those more meaningful metrics about how we're changing service in order to have a useful conversation with the rest of Arlington about our transit service. And so I really hope that whether it's a little bit of additional work from our consultant on this particular TSP update, or if it's our next TSP update, I really would love to see those sort of like relatable metrics on like, okay, the average time it takes on transit for an Arlingtonian to get to their closest restaurant will drop from 35 minutes to 28 minutes under the service. Like those sort of, things that mean things to people, which percentage increase in service just doesn't.
Just adding to that, I think the right sequencing there would be if you go back to your strategic plan desired outcomes on one of the initial slides and nest those key performance indicators kind of within, they need to align, like your overall objectives. I think we're expressing our thirst for dashboarding kind of metrics that you can use that we can track. And it has a lot to do with just showing how this makes Arlington more livable.
Absolutely. Anybody else before we let these fine folks go to sleep? All right, I think that's it. Thank you so much, Mr. Edwards, Ms. Rivers, and I'm sorry, the gentleman who is here with us in person. I have completely forgotten your name.
Paul Mounier.
One more time for me.
Paul Mounier.
Thank you, Mr. Mounier.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is the current STAR public engagement information item. And that's with staff member Clinton Edwards.
You're still muted, Mr. Edwards.
I was saying, Chair Slatton, commissioners, you haven't quite gotten rid of me quite just yet. I have just a brief update on where we are with STAR, our public engagement. And I'm going to share my screen. See if I can pull this up. Let me know if everyone can see my slide that starts with STAR public engagement.
Looks great.
All right. So we just spent some time talking about the fixed route system. And so, of course, with Arlington Transit, there's two arms of Arlington Transit. We have the fixed route system and then the specialized transportation system. The specialized transportation for Arlington residents, better known as STAR. What we are currently doing as we are going through the transit strategic plan for fixed route, we're engaging in a public engagement opportunity that is very targeted at those users that utilize the STAR service and also transit enthusiasts around the county and other places. And what we're doing right now is that we are doing a public engagement for those STAR users. The form is open. It's an online form that's open September 1st through 30th. I'll spill the beans a little bit here. We actually are going to extend this opportunity to give engagement till October 15th. This was feedback that we received when we talked with the Transit Advisory Committee Accessibility Subcommittee back on March the 12th. So this will go on for another 2 weeks going until October. What we're looking to do with this, and we're entering into this public engagement piece with no preconceived notion on any future outcomes, is that we want to have clear and accessible communication with the STAR users and others that want to give their feedback on STAR. What we have done to date is that we sent out a mailing. This postcard, if you look to the right of the slide, we sent this postcard to all of our 1,482 registered STAR users, informing them of the feedback opportunity. As you can see here, there's a QR code where those persons could scan, and it was front and back. We also, on the Arlington Transit website, we have a link right on the homepage to where the feedback opportunity is. During the past 2 weeks, any user that utilized STAR, they were also offered this postcard just as a reminder to let folks know that the feedback opportunity was open from September 1st through 30th. The call center, for those persons that aren't comfortable using the internet to provide the feedback, the call center representatives, when folks call in for questions or to make their reservations, they are also offering opportunities for STAR users to be able to provide their feedback. And then finally, earlier this week, we sent out an email reminder to all the registered STAR users whom we have email addresses for, just to let them know that the opportunity to provide their feedback, to tell us about their experience, that this opportunity still existed, because we, as the postcard said, we want to hear from you. Our additional outreach opportunities, of course, we're here before the Transportation Commission tonight. On September the 12th, we went before the Disability Advisory Committee and the Accessibility Subcommittee to receive their feedback on future phases of the STAR outreach. And then the Disability Advisory Commission, we went before that commission on the 19th of this month to get some feedback from them. As we've gone through and spoke with these different committees and commissions, we received lots of great feedback on how we should move forward with this outreach opportunity. And so what we're coming to you all tonight is to also provide you all the opportunity to let us know if there's other places, other opportunities, other ideas for phase 2 of this feedback. So at this point, I will cease talking. And if you all have any ideas, suggestions on how we should move forward to capture this specialized transportation community and to really make STAR as best as we can for everyone, please provide that at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. While other people think, I have only one suggestion for you, and it is not useful in this particular engagement, but I think it's something that should be considered the next time around that you do this sort of thing, which is, if we're going to go to the trouble of mailing something to people, it would be great if they had the option of filling out that a form on paper that was mailed to them and mail it back to help capture those folks who aren't comfortable using the internet. It's not a particularly higher cost going from mailing a postcard to somebody to instead mailing them an envelope that has a paper survey inside, which also has a link to do it online if they'd prefer to do it online. I just think that lowers that barrier for certain people to get their feedback back, but probably not useful this year. Anybody else have anything they want to share with Mr. Edwards? I think you guys are doing a pretty bang up job. And I'm seeing lots of shaking no heads here, so I don't think we have any other suggestions for you.
Okay, well, I have captured that about the mailing the actual survey in future efforts. We have a lot of different feedback feedback that we received from the other committees and commissions, as I previously mentioned. And so we will probably come back to you all later on this year to talk about where we're moving as we move into phase 2 of the feedback, and just providing an update of all of the feedback that we received, good, better, bad, or indifferent. So you'll probably hear from us later on this year after we analyze the results of this feedback opportunity.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, we have the NVTC Commuter Choice Grant Applications memo that you all received. And Richard Roisman is here to respond to any questions you may have.
Good evening, commissioners. In the interest of the late hour, I will be as brief as possible. I realize the memo only went out with 2 days notice, but it was only a single page, so hopefully everyone had a chance to review it. I don't feel like I need to go over the items in there, but if there are questions on what staff is considering for I-66 commuter choice call for projects, I'm happy to take them. As the memo notes, I'll be coming back next month for an action item. And if people do want me to go over things briefly that's in the memo, I'm happy to do so as well, but I want to be cognizant of the late hour.
I don't think I have any questions. Certainly supportive of Arlington Boulevard trail improvements, and we just had a very long discussion about being supportive of art bus service improvements, and the Fine Transit folks made it clear they were looking at applying for I-66 commuter choice funding, which is what we're talking about.
Exactly.
So it all makes sense to me here. Do other commissioners have comments or questions at this early point? All right. Then I appreciate the update, and I think all feel like we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I will just add from Mr. Edwards and Mr. Munier's presentation earlier that indicated that commuter choice is expected to cover roughly 40% of operating costs over a 2-year period. And I'll remind folks of this when we come back for the action item. That is due to the restrictions of the I-66 commuter choice program, which only reimburses for peak period, peak direction transit service. So that's where the 40% factor comes from.
Maybe we need to revisit that at some point now that people are looking at other hours of the day. But yes. All right. Thanks. Appreciate that. Anybody else?
Certainly.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Roisman.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the agenda items. Now we can move on to other business.
All right. I don't have a whole lot. I ended up putting me down as the primary on River House and Commissioner Theo as my backup. And given that during the next LRPC meeting, I am likely going to be on a cruise ship, I think I will probably have to tap you in as that backup on October 24th. Ms. Obakoya, we were still lacking a couple of alternates for a couple things. Is that true?
It's the Southeast General Land Use Plan and the Melwood Special Club.
So if you have an interest in 22202, those are both down that neck of the woods, almost kind of in the neighborhoods. 23rd Street Restaurant Row in Eads is that Eads Street Special Club. And Melwood is it's also on 23rd Street, isn't it? Commissioner, tell me.
I'll be chairing that one, that LFPC.
I'll do alternate for the 23rd, the Eads.
All right, let's put Mr. Shannon down as alternate for the East Street Special Club.
Doing the 8th Street, that's going to be postponed. So it's really easy for you, right? Because it's not, we're not going to schedule it for a while.
It got punted a little bit. Okay. Anybody want to back up Melwood?
I'm doing that one side across from Kebab Palace. The
Right.
little
I
bank.
think you're already the primary on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
And now.
So that's a part of Eads. Oh, and you're going to be the backup?
Shannon's now your backup.
Okay. All right, cool.
All right. We'll keep looking for an alternate for Melwood. It's a cool project. Somebody should be an alternate. All right. Anything else for the good of the order that people have? I will also thank Commissioner Yeri for his years of service on the Vision Zero. It has a very long, obnoxious acronym. Stakeholder something working group. It has a lot of letters. And thank Commissioner Theo for hopping on as his replacement. And yeah, when's our next meeting, Ms. Obukoy?
October 26th.
October 26th. So just before, Halloween. All right, great. No, we don't dress up. I checked. Ms. Obukoy is gonna counterman me here.
Never mind.
All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.